Our story begins with a young man facing terminal stomach cancer, yet the doctor simply tells him to go enjoy a meal at McDonald's while his parents tell him not to call them. They insist a minor illness won't kill anyone, but only Xiaawu knows he has just 3 months left as he leaves the hospital alone. He can't help but recall 19 years of his parents' blatant favoritism toward his younger sister, always being told that as the older brother, he must be sensible and yield to her at every turn. To the rest of the world, he was always the perfect child, but in their eyes, he was merely a disobedient son. Even after he suddenly collapsed this time, they still insisted on attending his sister's parent-teacher meeting, coldly telling him to just hurry home once his checkup was finished. Whenever these thoughts surface, his tears flow uncontrollably. It is at this moment that someone suddenly crashes into him from ahead, sending things scattering across the ground. He immediately apologizes out of habit, but as he looks closer at the man before him, he recognizes his former neighbor, Uncle Lu. Xiaawu, why don't you watch where you're going? You've dropped and broken everything. How did your parents raise you? Uncle Lu begins to scold him indiscriminately. I'll pay you for it, Xiaawu replies quietly. He pulls out several 100 yuan bills, and Uncle Lu, now beaming with joy, snatches the money and prepares to leave. Watching the man's retreating back, Xiaawu can't help but wonder why a dying man like himself is still acting so submissively, especially when it was clearly the other man's fault. Suddenly, he finds himself calling out, and he steps forward with a new sense of purpose. He takes the items from the man's hands and tosses them into a nearby trash can. Uncle Lu is stunned. What do you think you're doing? I paid you for these, Xiaawu states calmly, so they belong to me, and I can do whatever I want with them. Uncle Lu stands there dazed, unable to process the situation for a long moment. Then, Xiaoyu's tone shifts as he continues. And by the way, Uncle Lu, you were the one who ran into me, yet you had the nerve to blame me. Are you blind? The man's jaw drops in shock. Without another word, Xiaawu turns and walks away. When he finally arrives home, his parents and sister are already eating dinner. They all stare intently at him as he enters. He simply mutters that he's back and heads straight to his room. This is when his mother, Lingling, barely suppressing her rage, demands to know what's wrong with his attitude. After that, she continues to press him, questioning why Uncle Lu called to say that not only did he knock him down without apologizing, but he also gave the man a severe scolding. His father, Shou, arrives at the door at that very moment. Shou stands there with a darkened expression and says sternly, Xiaawu, you need to understand that this family never raised you to act this way. Making a mistake is fine, as long as you admit it. Now, call Uncle Lu and give him a sincere apology. To which Xiaawu simply replies with a flat, indifferent no, which, as you can imagine, was not the answer they expected. The two of them stand frozen for a long moment, unable to react. What is this attitude? We are only saying this for your own good. His parents' anger flares up instantly at his words, while Xiaawu begins to feel a wave of physical discomfort. Today was the day he went to the hospital for his results, yet from the moment he walked in, they haven't asked a single thing about his health. His mother, Lingling, seems to sense something is off for a brief second, but she only asks, Xiaawu, if you hit someone, shouldn't you apologize? Shou, however, is still fuming. Why waste your breath on him? Our family does not have such ill-mannered children. If he won't apologize, he shouldn't call us mom and dad ever again. I agree, Xiaawu replies coldly. He looks up at them and continues, you gave me my life, and I should have called you parents for the rest of my days. But since you are the ones demanding that I stop, then I will never call you mom or dad again. His parents stand there dazed, completely stunned by his words. They can't understand what is happening. Usually, no matter the situation, he would be rushing to apologize and admit fault. Shou is so enraged that his entire body begins to tremble violently, while Lingling looks at him with a face full of disappointment. Xiaawu, what has gotten into you? He looks back at them with a cold, hollow gaze. I want to get my medical records today, he says, and not once have you asked how I am doing. The two of them hesitate. So how is your illness? A real man shouldn't whine about a little sickness like a woman, his mother adds dismissively. Her words sounded sincere enough, though they were a bit late. His father, Shou, on the other hand, remained aggressive. I'm tired. Could you both please leave? Xiaawu closed his eyes in pain. He simply didn't have the energy to explain himself right now. Shou wanted to argue further, but Lingling quickly pulled him out. Moments later, Lingling's phone began to ring. Hello? I am Xiaoyu's doctor. He didn't take his medical records with him today. On the other end of the line, the elderly doctor's voice sounded heavy. There isn't any problem, is there? Lingling asked with a casual smile, even thanking the old doctor. The doctor remained silent for a long moment. Even though he didn't tell you the results, as his elders, I believe, you have the right to know the truth. You're making it sound quite scary. My son has always been in great health. Lingling replied, waving it off with a laugh. But the doctor continued with a heavy, sincere tone. Your son is suffering from late-stage gastric cancer. There is no cure. He only has 3 months left to live. Doctor, you must be joking. My son is perfectly healthy. He doesn't cough. He doesn't even sneeze. How is that possible? Suddenly, Lingling felt a wave of inexplicable terror wash over her. Professional medical equipment does not make mistakes, the old doctor replied, his voice flat and clinical. After he hung up the phone, Lingling stood frozen in place, completely stunned. No, this can't be, she whispered. I have to ask Xiaawu. With eyes full of panic, she rushed toward the second floor. Inside the room, Xiaawu was sleeping peacefully. Lingling stood there, watching him. And looking at his quiet face, she suddenly felt an indescribable ache. That night, Lingling lay in bed, reflecting on everything. She realized that she had never really given Xiaawu anything at all. She remembered. Years ago, when he said he wanted to eat durian. Because his sister hated the smell, she had told him, "As an older brother, you must give in to your sister." Another time, he had happily told them he had passed his exams. When he scored perfect marks in every subject, they simply smiled, taking it for granted. Yet when his sister barely passed, they celebrated with pure joy. As these memories flooded back, Lingling felt her heart begin to tear apart with agonizing pain. Why had it been this way? Her tears slowly soaked into the pillowcase. The next morning, Xiaawu woke up quite late. By the time he emerged, the family was already gathered at the dining table. To his surprise, they were eating dumplings, his favorite dish, though his sister happened to dislike them. Because of her, this meal was rarely ever served. "Brother, it's your favorite today," his mother said. "You must be happy." Xiaawu simply gave a faint, indifferent wave of his hand and said he wouldn't eat, before picking up his backpack and heading for the door. Chen Shou's voice echoed from behind. "I told you not to bother making those. It was a waste." Lingling followed him out. "Xiaawu, the hospital called me yesterday about your condition." She sobbed. "That isn't true, is it?" He hadn't intended to tell her, but since she knew, he simply accepted it. "Please don't tell anyone else," he said calmly. "I just want to spend these last 3 months in peace." "It can't be true," she pleaded. "Let's go for another checkup." The hospital must have made a mistake. He looked at her coldly and turned away. In the past, no matter what he did, he could never earn a single smile from them. This sudden change, to be perfectly honest, was something he wasn't used to. Behind him, Lingling was now a mess of tears. "Believe me," she cried, "your mother loves you." Shortly after, when Xiaawu arrived at school, he saw Li Jinnan and Lan Xinyu from a distance. Seeing him, Xinyu instinctively pulled away from Jinnan to create some space. Xiaawu merely offered a small, tired smile. As he walked right past them, Jinnan was his neighbor, a childhood friend he had grown up with. And Xinyu was the girl he had loved for a long time. It was a complicated dynamic, to say the least. In the past, seeing them together would have been painful, as Jinnan also liked Xinyu. But now, he had grown indifferent to it all. Seeing him walk away so coldly, Xinyu turned and called out his name. "It's not what you think. We just had things to discuss," she stammered. Xiaawu simply nodded in response. He strode toward the classroom without a word. For the first time, Xinyu felt a chill of fear at his coldness. "Xinyu, let's continue," Jinnan urged, but she apologized, saying she had to find Xiaawu because he seemed strange. She wasn't at all at ease, so she ran after him. Watching her back disappear, Jinnan's temper flared instantly. He kicked a tree in frustration. We learned that Jinnan was once Xiaoyu's close friend, though that was long ago. Over time, they had drifted apart, and eventually, Jinnan began looking for any excuse to cause Xiaoyu trouble. As for Xinyu, their story began at the seaside. It was a complicated beginning, to say the very least. He had met her when she was drowning, and without a second thought, he had jumped in to save her. Later, they ended up in the same class and grew close. Yet, regarding his confession of love, she remained silent. She never gave him a clear answer. He had truly believed that his efforts would eventually move her heart. Now, Xinyu caught up to him, breathless. "Xiaoyu, you seem different today," she noted with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he replied shortly. Xinyu found herself at a loss for words, which was quite a rare occurrence. In the past, seeing her with Jinnan would never have elicited a smile. Her sense of unease only grew stronger. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, he interrupted her. "Xinyu, the truth is, I used to like you." The sudden confession left her choked up and wanting to flee. He just smiled and turned away with total finality. As she watched Xiaoyu's retreating back, Xinyu felt an inexplicable, sharp pang of pain in her chest. Before, he would have pressed her for an answer, but now he simply didn't care. Later, in class, Jinnan was called on by the teacher to answer a question. Being a poor student, however, he just stood there looking foolish. Seeing this, the teacher couldn't help but sigh at the situation. The teacher remarked that they used to have Xiaawu help him, but those days, it seemed, were over. The teacher noted that the tutoring didn't seem to be helping much. "Xiaawu," she began, "I'll have to ask you to help Jinnan privately again." We see Xiaawu slowly stand up. "I've been a bit busy lately." "Teacher," he replied calmly, "perhaps you should find someone else." The teacher froze, and the rest of the class looked at him in complete surprise. To them, he was the model student who never refused a request. "Is something wrong?" she asked. An indescribable tension filled the air as Jinnan glared at Xiaawu with pure malice. "Teacher, it seems Jinnan has some issues with me," Xiaawu continued. "Every time I try to teach, she simply doesn't listen. I have better things to do than waste my time on this." Hearing Xiaawu be so blunt, the teacher could only nod awkwardly while the students whispered. They wondered how he could say such things, even ignoring the teacher's direct request. In the past, of course, he would have agreed immediately without a single complaint. Amidst the chatter, Xinyu stared at Xiaawu, lost in her own thoughts about his behavior. She recalled their earlier encounter, convinced this was just his strange way of confessing to her. Meanwhile, Jinnan stood there awkwardly, her fists clenched in a silent, burning rage. When the bell finally rang, the class monitor reminded both Xiaawu and Jinnan to clean up. Seeing Xiaawu packing his things, Jinnan slammed a broom down right in front of him. "Xiaawu, I have things to do today. You'll be doing the cleaning for me," she demanded. He glanced at her, noting her entitled expression. She wasn't asking, she was ordering him. Why should I, he asked. Because I'm busy. Didn't you always used to do it anyway? By then, he had finished packing and slung his bag over his shoulder, ignoring her entirely. With a straight face, she reminded him that they had grown up together, insisting she had things to do. You wouldn't refuse to help, would you? She asked. Seeing Jinnan's behavior, everyone nearby turned to watch. In the past, whenever Jinnan acted like this, Xiaawu would always prioritize the bigger picture and choose to yield. He would step back simply because he didn't want things to get ugly. But now, as Jinnan's expression grew more fierce, he acted as if he didn't even see her. He calmly told her she could remove the word not from her sentence. He clarified that he meant she should remove the not from not helping. Upon hearing this clever retort, several students nearby burst out laughing. Jinnan's face turned a bruised shade of blue from the humiliation. She gritted her teeth and glared at Xiaawu, accusing him of playing with her. He didn't even look at her as he walked past. Jinnan was so furious she was practically steaming. She would have preferred him to insult her rather than ignore her entirely. Feeling desperate and frustrated, she grabbed his shoulder and demanded that he stop right there. She claimed she was only asking for a favor, and if he wouldn't help, he should just say so instead of mocking her. Hearing this, Xiaawu suddenly recalled their past and laughed. He remembered the very first time he had refused her. Back then, she had nearly lunged at him to teach him a lesson, not wanting everyone to lose face. He had simply agreed to her demands. But after that, every time he tried to refuse, she would repeat this performance. He turned around now, his gaze cold and indifferent. He had reached his limit with her entitlement. He told her flatly that he had no obligation to help her. His sudden intensity left Jinnan feeling flustered and pathetic. Aren't we friends? She stammered. He corrected her immediately, stating they weren't friends, merely acquaintances. Secondly, he noted that even friends aren't obligated to help. Besides, her attitude was hardly that of someone asking for a favor. Jinnan broke into a cold sweat as she realized everyone was watching. She weakly claimed friends don't need to be so formal. Don't flatter yourself, he replied. We are not friends, especially if your friends are only there to be ordered around. I truly feel sorry for your friends then, Xiaawu said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Jinnan's face flushed a deep, angry red as the surrounding students watched in stunned silence, unable to believe their ears. But no one was more shocked than Xinyu. To her, Xiaawu seemed like a completely different person today. As she watched his retreating back, she felt a sudden, hollow ache in her chest, a sense of loss she couldn't explain. Xiaawu, you humiliated me. I won't let you get away with this. Jinnan screamed, losing all sense of composure. He lunged forward in a blind rage, even as two nearby students tried to hold him back. His eyes were bloodshot with fury. He shoved his classmates aside, shouting that if he didn't teach Xiaawu a lesson today, he wasn't fit to bear his own name. With that, he clenched his fists and charged. A few of the more timid girls in the room actually cried out in fear. Looking at Jinnan's violent posture, it seemed as though he intended to beat Xiaawu to death right there in the classroom. We see the physical mismatch clearly. Jinnan is much taller and broader than the seemingly frail and slender Xiaawu. On paper, he was no match for the bully, but as Jinnan closed the distance, Xiaawu delivered a swift kick to his chest. The impact sent Jinnan flying backward until he crashed onto a desk. The entire room froze in absolute disbelief. Xiaawu gave him one last cold look, reminding him that he had practiced Wing Chun in the past, before casually walking out. Xiaawu, I'll kill you. Jinnan roared from the floor, his voice cracking with desperation and physical pain. He began to cough violently from the exertion and the blow. Meanwhile, the other students remained rooted to the spot. Even now, they couldn't process what they had just witnessed. It was as if the natural order of the school had been flipped. They whispered among themselves, wondering what could have possibly happened to change Xiaawu so drastically. Xinyu, Xinyu, a girl called out as they watched Xinyu suddenly stand up and chase after Xiaawu. In the past, she would have rushed to comfort Jinnan first. Today, however, her priorities had shifted in a very strange way. Seeing Xinyu run after his rival, Jinnan's remaining bravado vanished instantly, leaving him looking like a deflated balloon. The onlookers cast sympathetic glances his way, as everyone in class knew the situation. Jinnan was head over heels for Xinyu. However, Xinyu had always harbored feelings for Xiaawu. We see Xiaawu come to a halt, though he doesn't speak at first. He simply looks at Xinyu with a cold, indifferent gaze. She tells him he seems very strange today, which prompts a sharp response. He asks if she's there to interrogate him. Panicking instantly, Xinyu waves her hands, insisting that isn't her intention at all. In the past, Xinyu might not have said it directly, but her words always tended to blame Xiaawu for any conflict. She used to feel he should consider the bigger picture. Now he simply asks what she wants and what has really happened. She remarks that he has changed so much they hardly recognize him. He coldly replies that his affairs are no one else's concern. He tells her not to worry, as he won't let his issues affect anyone else. Hearing this, Xinyu feels a sudden, sharp pang in her heart. She wonders if, in his eyes, she is now just another someone else to be dismissed. She mentions their conversation from this morning. When she asks if he wants to know the result, he says it's unnecessary. This confuses her, as he used to constantly press for answers. Xinyu grows anxious, sensing that if she lets him walk away now, things between them will be over forever. He tells her it's fine. He says he won't waste any more of her time and that she should live her own life. She stammers that she just hadn't made up her mind. She claims it wasn't that she didn't like him. He simply says if there's nothing else, he's leaving. She asks if they can go back to how they were. He tells her they will always be friends. Sinyu clutches her chest, finding that the word friends makes it almost impossible to breathe. It is the first time she has felt such a piercing, physical ache. Meanwhile, after Jinan finishes cleaning, the sky has already grown dark. Carrying his bag, he enters a room filled with various portraits. In the center, a young man in his early 20s is busy painting. Hearing the noise, the artist turns around. Jinan looks at him and immediately offers an apology for the intrusion. The painter, a man named Sun Chi, stops his work and faces the boy. Jinan looks toward him, his frustration still visible. Sun Chi grew up in the same neighborhood and has always looked after Jinan like a big brother. To be honest, he knows him too well. He asks if Jinan had another falling out with Xiaawu, noting that he only runs here after they've had a fight. Sun Chi mentions that Jinan knows Xiaawu also visits this place, causing Jinan to fall into a heavy, brooding silence. He wonders why, if they are friends, he does these things, admitting he bullied Xiaawu again today simply because he can't stand him. He complains that despite growing up together, Xiaawu always seems to be one step ahead, overshadowing him in everyone's eyes. He feels that whatever Xiaawu does is seen as right, bitterly asking why everyone only notices him and ignores Jinan's existence. The conflict between Jinan and Xiaawu is deep-rooted, and Sun Chi knows it will take more than a few words to resolve it. He recalls Jinan crying to him in the past, lamenting how his mother constantly compared his personality and grades to Xiaowu's. Back then, Jinan only felt a sense of resistance towards Xiaawu, but everything began to shift when they met Sinyu. We see that his mere resistance transformed into something far more intense once Sinyu entered the picture, causing a massive change. Although Xiaawu was the one who actually saved Sinyu's life, she ended up with a completely wrong impression of the event. It was a misunderstanding that changed everything. Because of Jinan's interference, she couldn't accept Xiaawu, yet Jinan is the one who understands her true feelings best. Since then, Jinan has harbored a deep hatred for Xiaawu, though deep down, he is also paralyzed by a secret fear. He is terrified that Sinyu will discover the truth, especially since he had claimed to be her savior with such certainty. He had used that lie to beg Sinyu not to accept Xiaawu, and now, he impatiently hangs up his phone and turns to leave. Watching his retreating figure, Sun Chi lets out a soft sigh, his eyes filled with a growing sense of worry for what's to come. He looks toward the entrance, remembering how Xiaawu and Jinan used to arrive here one after the other, but not today. By the time Xiaawu finally returns home, it is already quite late, and his parents and sister are gathered around the television. He simply announces his return with a brief word and heads straight for his room, hoping to avoid any further conversation. His father, Qinsho, stands up with a dark expression and demands to know why he is returning home at such an hour. He asks what Xiaawu has been doing outside, to which Xiaawu coldly asks if it's even necessary to explain his every move. His father barks that he never used to come home this late, and that he is becoming a massive disappointment. Xiaawu simply retorts that he has always been a disappointment to them. He tells his father that he has never actually cared about him. Stunned, Qinsho asks what he means, wondering how he could say such a thing after being raised with proper manners. He demands to know if this is how Xiaawu was taught to respect his elders and speak to his own father. Suddenly, Xiaawu feels a wave of suffocating oppression wash over him. He wonders what a father is even supposed to be. Feeling exhausted and unwilling to argue, he tells them that if there is nothing else, he would like to go rest. Qinsho is shaking with pure rage, while Linyu watches the scene unfold with a racing heart. It is a tense family moment, to say the least. His father demands to know where he was so late and what kind of shameful, shady things he was doing out there in the dark. Hearing the words, shameful things makes Xiaoyu's heart turn even colder. Linyu grabs Qinsho's arm, her tears starting to flow uncontrollably. As his heart hardens further, Linyu continues to hold Qinsho back, weeping and begging him to stop saying such harsh things to their son. Qinsho sneers, telling Xiaawu to look at himself and how he's become nothing more than an uneducated little thug. To be honest, the insults are getting quite personal. He shouts that Xiaawu has shamed the entire family. Xiaawu fires back, asking if his father even knows what actually happened before he started throwing accusations. His father counters that Xiaawu is simply trying to evade responsibility instead of reflecting on his own mistakes. He wonders who could have possibly raised him this way. Qinsho's voice grows louder and more confident as he scolds him. Meanwhile, Xiaoyu's younger sister has approached, having never seen her father this terrifying before. She pleads with him, "Brother, just admit you're wrong. Dad is really angry." She tries her best to persuade him to just give in for the sake of peace. Linyu also looks at Xiaawu with hopeful eyes, but he stands firm. He insists he has done nothing wrong and won't apologize, feeling that further words are utterly meaningless. He tells them that if they want to call the police, they should go right ahead. He just wants to escape this place, as staying here makes it impossible for him to find any peace. His sister stares at him blankly, thinking that a simple apology would have ended everything. They simply don't understand why Xiaawu refuses to yield. At that moment, Xinsho pulls off his belt, preparing to strike Xiaawu with it. It's a scene of escalating tension that has reached a breaking point. Lin Yu quickly throws her arms around Xinsho to stop him, calling for their daughter to help pull him away before things get even worse. Xinsho adores his daughter, and with her there, he likely won't follow through with the blow. After Xiaawu retreats to his room, the chaos doesn't end. Xinsho's furious roars continue to echo through the door without pause, as he screams for them to let him go so he can teach that brat a lesson. Xinsho roars that he needs to teach him a lesson, demanding to know who the boy thinks he is when every scrap of food and clothing was provided by him. He shouts that if he didn't provide for him, the boy would be starving on the streets. Hearing this, Xiaoyu's tears begin to fall despite his best efforts to stay strong. He can't help but wonder why he was even born into this world. Later that night, we see Xiaawu staring blankly at his books, lost in thought. Lin Yu enters the room, playing the role of the loving mother. She tells him softly that she is his mother and has only come because she cares. Xiaawu simply replies that he doesn't need her concern, but Lin Yu sits on the edge of the bed anyway, refusing to leave his side. She tells him that his father truly only wants what is best for him. Xiaawu doesn't argue. He simply meets her words with a heavy, hollow silence. Lin Yu continues, explaining that his father was just like him when he was young, but certain circumstances prevented him from ever attending university. Because of that, she explains, he has placed all of his own failed hopes and dreams onto his son's shoulders. She claims his harshness is merely a form of love, but to Xiaawu, none of this matters anymore, not when he feels his own life is already fading away. She reminds him that they are a family and should face everything together. Xiaawu, however, has heard enough and tells her he wants to rest. He impatiently cuts her off, leaving Lin Yu standing there with tears in her eyes before she finally turns and leaves the room. As soon as she returns to her own room, Xinsho demands to know if that idiot said something hurtful to her, threatening to go back and finish the job. Lin Yu suddenly screams no, with a sharp desperation that startles Xinsho, catching him completely off guard. He watches as her tears flow uncontrollably. She tries to speak Xiaoyu's name, but the words seem to catch in her throat. She finds herself unable to say what is truly on her mind. Seeing his wife in such pain, the fire of rage in Xinsho's eyes only burns brighter. Lin Yu can only shake her head and weep, while Xinsho's expression turns incredibly dark and grim. To him, the situation has reached a point of no return. He decides that since Xiaawu turned out this way because he wasn't disciplined enough, he will take it upon himself to fix him properly. That night, sleep refuses to come for Xiaawu. He remembers how his father used to be strict, yes, but also deeply affectionate toward him. He can't quite pinpoint when his father's love curdled into this bitterness. On the following morning, we see him preparing for another day. Xiaawu goes through the motions, coldly announcing he is leaving for school, while his mother finishes preparing a breakfast he has no intention of eating. Aren't you going to eat? Lin Yu asks, but as Xiaawu looks at the table, he is stunned. He turns to his younger sister, Mimi, asking about breakfast. Mimi keeps her head down, too afraid to speak. It isn't long before Lin Yu discovers the breakfast discarded in the trash can. She looks at Xinsho with profound disappointment, asking if he did this. He simply replies that today, he intends to show the boy who is in charge. He wants to establish who the master of this house is. Lin Yu trembles with rage, but Xinsho stands up, refusing to let the matter go. Look at him, acting like a little thug, he sneers. It makes me sick. Lin Yu finally snaps, asking what kind of father could say such things. She reminds him that Xiaawu is his son, but Xinsho insists this is all for the boy's own good. Then, he turns his gaze back toward Xiaawu. He tells him that since he eats his food and wears his clothes, he has no right to bargain. If he doesn't do as he's told, there will be consequences. He warns that he will never forgive him. Xiaawu calmly replies that he doesn't need his forgiveness, prompting Xinsho to slam his fist down. The blow rattles the table. To be honest, the man's temper has completely bypassed reason at this point, leaving the room in a heavy, suffocating tension. Lin Yu and Mimi are both trembling with fear. Xinsho roars that if Xiaawu walks out that door today, he should never bother coming back. Xiaawu coldly states that he will find a time to move out and will no longer be a burden. Enraged, Xinsho tells him to get out and take his things with him. He tells him to leave this home forever. Lin Yu can no longer contain herself and screams, asking why he would say such cruel things to their son. Xinsho maintains he is doing it for the boy's sake, claiming Xiaawu is the one who cannot distinguish between right and wrong. Lin Yu asks if humiliating him is his idea of help. Xinsho counters that it was her indulgence that allowed the boy to become like this. He goes as far as to say that if he knew things would turn out this way, he should have strangled the boy the moment he was born. The words are met with a sharp slap as Lin Yu strikes Xinsho across the face. He stands there, stunned, unable to immediately process the blow. Mimi bursts into terrified tears. Xinsho begins to shout in a blind fury, while Lin Yu covers her face and sobs uncontrollably. She asks if he even realizes what is happening to their family. Seeing his wife in such a state, Xinsho feels a sudden, uncharacteristic wave of panic. He tries to speak Xiaoyu's name, but the boy kicks the front door open. He tells them not to worry, as he will move out as soon as possible. He repeats his intention to leave, his voice devoid of emotion. Behind him, his mother can only cry out his name as the door slams shut. Xiaawu tries to tell his mother he doesn't mind, but Qinshu roars for him to stop, demanding to know who taught him to be so disrespectful. Xiaawu ignores the shouting and walks out the door, with Qinshu's voice trailing right behind him, filled with a desperate, ugly fury. He screams that if the boy leaves now, their bond is severed forever, though his voice is visibly trembling with a sudden, sharp fear. The boy gives him one final look before turning away for good. Suddenly panicked, Qinshu rushes forward, calling out Xiaoyu's name. Linyu immediately steps in his way to block him. Frustrated and frantic, Qinshu snaps at her, asking what on earth she thinks she's doing. He asks if she really wants to watch their son sever all ties with them. We see Linyu looking at his panicked face with growing indignation. She asks him bitterly if this wasn't exactly the result he wanted. He stammers that he only wanted the boy to become someone better. Linyu stares at him through her tears. Qinshu begins to explain himself in a frantic rush, claiming she knows his true intentions. He insists he always had a vision for the kind of person Xiaawu should become. In his plan, the boy was meant to be the best. He wanted him to be perfect, but the boy failed, and he blames Linyu for that failure too. He repeats that he was supposed to be the best. Linyu finally screams at him, cutting through his delusions. To be honest, his obsession with perfection has finally pushed everyone away. Qinshu's face turns deathly pale as cold sweat breaks out. She tells him she knows the truth, that he is simply afraid of his own son. Seeing his deepest secrets exposed, Qinshu's lips begin to quiver. She suggests his fear stems from that one specific incident in the past. Qinshu shakes his head, refusing to admit it, while Linyu covers her face and sobs that he has finally succeeded in losing his son. His legs give out, and he collapses onto the floor in a heap. Suddenly, a wave of realization hits him. He needs to find the boy immediately. Meanwhile, we find Xiaoku and Lan Xingyu discussing why Xiaawu has changed so much lately, while Feng Ruobing listens in silence. Ruobing coldly suggests a woman is behind the change. Hearing this, Xingyu suddenly feels a strange, uncomfortable pang of distress. Just then, Xiaawu walks out of the classroom with his backpack. Xingyu snaps out of her thoughts and rushes after him, calling his name. He asks if she needs something or where he's going. She originally intended to ask if he had a girlfriend, but the words catch in her throat. She struggles to find the right question, unable to bring herself to mention the girlfriend rumors. It seems some things are simply too difficult to ask. The question is right on the tip of her tongue, but she can't bring herself to ask it, so she simply suggests they go to the library together. Xiaawu gives her a brief look, remembering how he used to make that same request, only for Xingyu to refuse because she feared the gossip. He tells her to forget it because he has things to do, prompting her to ask, with a hint of desperation, what those things might be. Xingyu takes a few steps forward, clearly agitated, demanding to know why he won't tell her when he used to share everything with her. He calmly tells her that the past is the past and should stay there, but she insists that she doesn't want to let it go. She asks if their history is truly over, but Xiaawu offers no answer, forcing Xingyu to look up and meet his eyes directly. She asks if he has fallen for someone else, but he simply reminds her that they are nothing more than classmates and never were. He explains he has no obligation to confess anything to her, though she reminds him, quite correctly, that he was the one who confessed first. He points out that she rejected him then. She claims she just hadn't decided yet, but he no longer has the time to wait for her. As he turns to leave, Xingyu is overcome by a wave of distress, suddenly recalling Ruobing's warning about another woman in his life. Unable to let it end this way, Xingyu casts aside her hesitation and begins to run after Xiaoyu's retreating figure. By the time she reaches the school gates, however, she sees Xiaawu standing beside a striking, elegant young woman. We see the two of them chatting and laughing as they walk out of the academy together, leaving a devastated Xingyu watching from afar. As her tears begin to fall, we transition to Xiaawu asking Zhui Wessian for help finding a place to live, which clearly catches her off guard. To be honest, the idea of a good boy, like him moving out on his own, is quite a surprise to Wessian, who happens to be his classmate's sister. She was the one who taught him how to swim years ago, and as he thanks her, he can't help but admire her confident, easy smile. After saying goodbye to her, the sky begins to darken, and we find Xiaawu sitting alone on a park bench as the evening settles in. Suddenly, his phone begins to ring with a call from his mother, Linyu, but he silences it immediately, only for it to ring again and again. Growing impatient, Xiaawu shuts the phone off entirely and leans back, closing his eyes as he recalls a memory from long ago. He remembers running away once as a child and hiding in his favorite spot, certain his parents would find him quickly, but in the end, he hadn't seen a trace of them, and in the end, he had simply returned home because he was starving. Thinking of this, his heart felt heavy. The bitterness was overwhelming. He truly couldn't understand why, if they disliked him so much, they had even brought him into this world. We return to the house, where Linyu is calling his phone over and over, only to be met with silence every single time. In her desperation, Linyu suddenly remembers something and begins frantically searching through her contacts. Meanwhile, Xingyu is still fixated on that mystery woman. She wonders who could possibly be by Xiaoyu's side. Just then, her phone rings. It's Chen Lin, asking if she knows where his brother is. Surprised to hear he hasn't returned home yet, Xingyu finds herself thinking of that woman again. It was a bitter thought, to be sure. Gritting her teeth, she says petulantly that he's probably out on a date with some woman. Chun-Lin replies that she doesn't understand the situation. He reveals that Xiaawu and their father had a massive argument that morning. Upon hanging up, Xingyu finds it impossible to remain calm. She had no idea Xiaawu was going through something so painful, and suddenly, her heart clenches with a sharp, stinging guilt. She wonders why she didn't notice his distress sooner. Quickly changing her clothes, she rushes out the door into the empty streets. The roads are deserted, and though she searches for a long time, she can't find a single clue as to where he might be. We see her wandering through the quiet night, desperately looking for any sign of him. She heads toward the places Xiaawu loved most. She visits every spot where he used to enjoy spending his time, but he is nowhere to be found. By now, her mind is a complete mess. Chun-Lin calls again to ask for updates, but Xingyu simply shakes her head. Then, a sudden realization strikes her like a bolt of lightning. She hangs up abruptly and begins running toward the seaside as fast as her legs can carry her. From a distance, she finally spots a familiar figure. She is about to approach him when she notices another person has already reached Xiaoyu's side. Xingyu's eyes hadn't deceived her before. It was that same woman again. Tears begin to pour down her face as she realizes that while she was frantically searching for him, he was right here, enjoying a quiet moment with someone else. Overcome with grief, she turns and runs away just as Chun-Lin calls again. She ignores the call entirely. Meanwhile, Zhui Yuexian leads Xiaawu inside and begins to question him with a surprisingly solemn tone. He instinctively tries to stand up, but Yuexian taps him on the head, asking where he thinks he's going so late at night. When she asks where he thinks he's going, Xiaawu mutters that he wants to go home. She points out that if he truly wanted that, he wouldn't be sleeping on the streets. She tells him to stay put, or else his senior will truly get angry. Xiaawu insists he doesn't want to cause trouble, but Yuexian isn't afraid of a little trouble. In that moment, Xiaawu feels a strange, sudden wave of bitterness washing over him. It was all becoming a bit much, to be honest. Yuexian tells him it's time to explain everything. When he asks if he can stay silent, her look says it all, and Xiaawu lets out a heavy sigh. As he begins to reveal his true situation, Zhui Yuexian stands frozen in shock. Around the corner, a water cup hits the floor and shatters into pieces. A young man stands there, mouth agape, staring blankly at Xiaawu. It is Zhuolin, who asks with a trembling voice if there hasn't been some mistake. He can't believe it. Quickly regaining his senses, he says excitedly that they must go back to the hospital for another checkup immediately. He is certain it's a mistake. Xiaawu explains that he didn't want them to know precisely because he was worried it would cause them this much pain. When asked if it's truly confirmed, Xiaawu admits he only has 3 months left and wants to live them well. Zhuolin reminds him they promised to be brothers for life. He asks if Xiaawu has forgotten their pact, shaking his shoulders violently as tears begin to stream down his face. It was a heartbreaking sight, really. Xiaawu fights back his own agony, suggesting they can be brothers in the next life too. Zhuolin shakes his head helplessly, stumbling backward in total despair. Watching this scene unfold, Yuexian can no longer hold back her own tears. The next day, we find ourselves in the classroom as the teacher taps on Xiaoyu's desk. The teacher tells Xiaawu to follow him and immediately walks out of the room. A perfectly ordinary morning, it seemed, until that very moment. The other students watched the scene with strange, knowing looks. Most of them had already received calls from the teacher and knew about the previous night's events. Zhuolin offers to go along, but Xiaawu simply shakes his head. He knew this was something he had to face on his own. Upon arriving at the faculty office, we see that other teachers are present. However, there is one other person waiting there as well. It is Xiaoyu's father, Qinshu. He sits there with a dark, brooding expression, looking as though he has suffered a great personal embarrassment. The moment his eyes land on his son, the tension in the room becomes almost suffocating. Qinshu remains seated, his silence speaking volumes about the anger he is currently suppressed. He doesn't say a word at first, but his gaze is cold enough to freeze the air around them. His father snaps at him to tell the truth immediately, while the teacher tries to explain that there is more to the situation. Qinshu claims that his son has suddenly become a different person, full of lies and deceit. He insists on teaching the boy a lesson so he will change his ways, but the teacher urges him to remain calm. Noticing the other teachers staring, the class advisor gestures for Qinshu to lower his voice and compose himself. Qinshu glares angrily at Xiaawu before sitting back down, asking one last time if he truly has nothing to say. Xiaawu simply shakes his head, feeling that while he might have explained things to others, he has no desire to speak to his father. The teacher sighs and beckons to the door, where 2 familiar figures slowly make their entrance. It is Li Jinan and Lan Xingyun. The teacher mentions that Jinan reported seeing Xiaawu with a girl the previous night. He is asked if he admits to being intimate with her, as Jinan claims to have witnessed the entire scene personally. Jinan explains that when the teacher called him to help search, he never expected to find Xiaawu in such a compromising position. He insists their behavior was far too close, which is why the drama of the previous night unfolded as it did. Jinan adds that Xingyun was there as well and can serve as a witness to everything they saw. The teacher turns to Lan Xingyun, and Xiaawu does the same, remembering the long time they had spent together as friends. He thought that even if Jinan didn't understand him, surely Xingyun would. But Xingyun keeps a cold, expressionless face. Ignoring Xiaoyu's gaze, Xingyun simply nods and confirms to the teacher that he was indeed there. He claims that although it was dark and hard to see clearly, he could tell Xiaoyu and the girl were very close. He suggests their relationship was anything but ordinary. Hearing this, Xiaoyu can only let out a self-deprecating laugh. Chunshou can no longer contain himself and stands up again, convinced he finally understands the root of the problem. He demands to know if this is how Xiaoyu repays his hard work, wasting the money earned for his education on such scandals. He concludes that this explains all of Xiaoyu's recent strange behavior, leaving Chunshou breathless with mounting rage. Chunshou gasps for air, teeth clenched in a fury, but when he catches the class advisor's sharp gaze, he hesitates. He grinds his teeth once more and sits back down with a humiliated expression, while the teacher turns toward Li Jinnan and Lan Xingyun. The teacher warns them to be absolutely certain, as such accusations can ruin a student's reputation. Jinnan doesn't hesitate for a second. He confirms his story immediately, and after a brief moment of hesitation, Lan Xingyun gives a heavy, decisive nod. Just then, a new figure appears. Zhuolin stumbles into the room, looking disheveled and frantic as she cries out that the teacher has it all wrong. She claims Xiaoyu was actually with her last night, then turns to Xingyun, reminding him that they were all supposed to be close friends. She insists that Xingyun knows Xiaoyu isn't that kind of person and would never intentionally cause trouble for anyone else. Xingyun's mind flashes back to the events of the previous night. He grits his teeth and mutters that one can never truly know a person's heart. He insists he saw it with his own eyes, leaving Zhuolin so angry, she nearly curses aloud as Jinnan looks her way. Jinnan tells her he knows she is Xiaoyu's best friend, but claims this isn't the right way to help him. Zhuolin begins to snap back, but the teacher's stern voice cuts her off, and Zhuolin is forced to fall silent. The advisor then turns his focus elsewhere. With the room quiet, the teacher looks steadily at Xiaoyu and asks him to finally speak up and tell his side of the story. He tells the boy not to worry and to simply be honest, promising that the school will investigate everything to ensure no one is wrongly accused. At the teacher's prompting, every eye in the room shifts towards Xiaoyu, waiting with bated breath for his confession or his defense. Xiaoyu glances at the crowd, feeling a bitterness he can't quite describe. By now, we see he has stopped expecting anything from them. To be honest, he has lost all hope for a fair hearing, but seeing his former friends and his own father treat him like an enemy, well, that still hurts more than he cares to admit. He only wanted to get through these last 3 months in peace, but that seems impossible now. It was a luxury he couldn't afford. He looks at the teacher and calmly states that he has nothing to say, and that what they saw was the truth. He takes a deep breath as Jinnan's face lights up with triumph, while Chunshou and Lan Xingyun both look on with pure disappointment. Chunshou's eyes widen in a fresh wave of rage as he raises a fist and lunges forward, demanding to know why his son would do this. The class advisor reacts with impressive speed, stepping forward to block Chunshou and catching his outstretched arm as the father's face contorts with rage. Fuming with anger, Chunshou demands the teacher move aside, insisting that today he must finally teach this fool a proper lesson. He shouts that he finally understands why his son's personality changed so suddenly, claiming this shameful behavior explains everything. He curses Xiaoyu for ignoring his studies to pursue such harmful things, threatening to beat him as the other teachers nearby begin to notice. Seeing the commotion, the other teachers rush over to calm Chunshou down, and he finally stops, his face flushed deep red with embarrassment. To be honest, the situation is far too humiliating for him to stay, while Lan Xingyun gazes at Xiaoyu with a look of profound disappointment. She feels a heavy weight in her chest, unable to believe that the person who once swore to love and protect her could do something like this. In her eyes, he has become utterly disappointing. A little later, as they leave the faculty office, Zhuolin looks at Xiaoyu with a frustrated expression. She asks him why he didn't just tell the truth, but Xiaoyu simply looks back, feeling there is nothing left worth saying. He realizes he has so little time left and no longer wishes to waste it desperately explaining himself as he did in the past. Zhuolin insists they will regret this, but Xiaoyu just smiles. Whatever happens to them now simply doesn't interest him anymore. He smiles and shakes his head dismissively, just as Li Jinnan and Lan Xingyun approach them from behind. Jinnan glances at him and tells Xiaoyu not to hold a grudge, claiming he only did it for his own good to keep him from straying. That was the final straw for Zhuolin, who explodes like a powder keg, lunging forward to grab Jinnan by his collar. Jinnan struggles uneasily in her grip, asking what she thinks she's doing, but he knows Zhuolin is a trained martial artist. Since he stands no chance in a fight against her, Xiaoyu quietly tells her to let it go, and she reluctantly releases him. She glares coldly at Jinnan, telling him she knows exactly what he's up to, and that he's clearly just jealous of Xiaoyu. She mocks him for having no honor, resorting to such low-handed tactics, because he could never measure up fairly. Jinnan's face turns a sickly shade of pale as Zhuolin shoves him away with total contempt. Jinnan loses his balance and falls clumsily to the ground, while Zhuolin tells Xingyun she expected her, of all people, to know Xiaoyu better. We see Lan Xingyun overcome by a sudden wave of grievance, firmly believing that she is the one who has been betrayed in all of this. Filled with indignation, she stares back at Zhuolin, her heart heavy with the conviction that her trust was misplaced. She tells herself that while she thought she knew Xiaawu best, she was clearly wrong, though in her mind, the fault lies entirely with him. Zhuolin retorts that given Xiaoyu's current situation, it's tragic that the person who supposedly knew him best is now his greatest opponent. Zhuolin warns her she will regret this, but Xingyun coldly replies that she knows herself too well to ever regret leaving someone like him. At this moment, Xingyun feels her only true regret was ever liking him at all. The disappointment is simply too much to bear. Xiaawu gently pulls Zhuolin away, telling her it's time to go, and they turn to leave without looking back. Watching his retreating figure, Xingyun clenches her small fists as the bitterness deepens. She wonders why she is the one suffering when he is at fault. She tells herself again that she will never regret this, watching their shadows disappear with a stubborn, hurt defiance. As the school bell rings, Xiaawu and Zhuolin head out together, leaving the rest of the class buzzing with relentless gossip. The students whisper, wondering what could have happened to make him stop going home, some insisting Xiaawu isn't that kind of person. Others point out that such accusations could lead to serious school discipline, warning the group not to spread rumors without proof. The debate continues as they worry about the consequences of a formal punishment, while Li Jinan listens to the chatter with growing irritation. Jinan suddenly stands up, glancing toward the door where Xiaawu vanished, and lets out a cold, mocking laugh. He tells the class that one can know a face, but not a heart, claiming he saw the truth with his own eyes, and they don't know the real Xiaawu. His words silence the room, leaving Lan Xingyun staring blankly at the door, unable to focus on a single lesson for the rest of the day. Her friend Feng Ruobing asks if she's all right, her voice laced with concern, which finally snaps Xingyun out of her daze. She quickly gathers her things and bolts for the classroom door, claiming she has urgent business and needs to head home early. The other students watch her leave in surprise, noting that Xingyun has been acting just as strange as everyone else today. Meanwhile, out on the street, Zhuolin waves as Zhuo Yuxian approaches with a smile, dressed elegantly in a light blue outfit. We see her in a soft skirt and fuzzy boots, looking gentle yet striking, a look that suits her perfectly. She tells Zhuolin not to be so formal, asking why she's being polite with her own sister before inquiring about the dorm search. Zhuolin teases her, wondering if she's really her sister since she seems to treat Qin Xiaawu even better than her. She continues the playful jab while Yuxian explains she found 2 places that are quite promising. Both spots are close to the school and reasonably priced, so they decide to head over and take a look immediately. Yuxian notes it all depends on which one Xiaawu prefers, as she's already arranged for both apartments to be held. Xiaawu offers his thanks, mentioning he has a card with all his scholarship money that should cover a few months of living. Yuxian playfully ruffles his hair, which, naturally, triggers another wave of mock dissatisfaction from Zhuolin. In a nearby corner, we find Lan Xingyun watching this scene, her lips trembling as tears begin to fall. She had followed them as if possessed, and seeing them together now, she feels like an absolute fool. To her, the situation seems undeniable. She is convinced they are all in league together and that he deserves his punishment. Xingyun begins to sob quietly as the figures ahead start to walk away, yet she finds herself following them once more. She calls herself an idiot for trailing them, watching as they walk along, talking and laughing together. Feeling helpless, she leans against a tree in front of the apartment building, her heart heavy with a sense of grievance. As she watches their cheerful interaction from the shadows, the weight of her perceived betrayal becomes almost too much to bear. She tells herself she already knew what kind of person he was, yet she still wanted to believe in him, a foolish hope, indeed. Suddenly, a voice interrupts her thoughts. "You're Lan Xingyun, right? I'm Zhui Yuxian." Xingyun is startled, wondering how she knew. Yuxian remarks that since she's so pretty and followed them the whole way, it wasn't hard to guess. Xingyun, feeling exposed, lowers her head. Just as Xingyun turns to leave, Yuxian asks if she isn't curious about why they've come to this place. The question makes Xingyun freeze in her tracks, though she stubbornly retorts that they're probably up to something shameful. Yuxian explains that Qin Xiaawu needed to move out of his home, so he asked for help finding a place after a major fight with his family. He had nowhere to go last night and was prepared to spend it on the street until she and Zhuolin brought him home. At this point, Yuxian looks over at her, noting that from the look of things, the two of them must have had a falling out as well. She suggests they try to communicate properly, reminding her that given their relationship, she should be the one who knows him best. She asks if he would really do the things she suspects, emphasizing again that she ought to be the person who truly understands Qin Xiaawu. The question lingers in the air. Shouldn't she be the most certain about what kind of person he is and what he is capable of doing? Lan Xingyun's face turns a deep shade of red as a wave of guilt washes over her, and she begins to wander the streets in a daze. She moves like a soulless machine, her mind racing with the impossibility of it all, insisting to herself that she saw what she saw. As she wonders how things became so distorted, she recalls the words of both Zhuolin and Yuxian, and the weight of it begins to sink in. It feels like a heavy blow to her chest as the phrase, "You should be the one who knows him best," echoes repeatedly in her mind. Suddenly remembering something crucial, Xingyun fumbles with her backpack to pull out her phone and calls Qinlin. She asks if her brother had a fight with the family, and Lin confirms it, sounding concerned by Yun's frantic tone. The realization that he really is moving out hits her with such force that her phone slips from her hand and clatters onto the pavement. Without a second thought, she bolts back the way she came, desperate to find Xiaawu and apologize for her terrible mistake. Back on the street, Lin is startled to see Yun return, and her expression quickly turns cold and unwelcoming. Yun is breathless, her heart set on telling Xiaawu she was wrong, but Lin remains unimpressed by her sudden appearance. When Yun asks where he is, her voice filled with urgency, Lin simply looks at her with a sense of deep-seated disdain. She mockingly tells the young lady to stay away, claiming they can't afford to provoke someone of her status and she should drop the act. With her voice breaking into a sob, Yun pleads that she truly knows she was wrong and just wants to find Xiaawu. Deep down, she realizes that when he was at his lowest, she wasn't there for him. Instead, she had stood with everyone else against him. Lin reminds her how hopeless he must have felt when she doubted him, coldly telling her to leave since they clearly live in different worlds. Desperate, Yun turns toward Yuen, begging for forgiveness and pleading to know where Xiaawu is staying. Lin tells her sister not to say a word, but Yun rushes forward, her voice breaking as she continues to beg for help. She insists she only wants to say she's sorry, but Lin isn't buying it. After all, who would believe her after her earlier accusations? She mocks Yun for claiming she saw it with her own eyes only to act sorry now, but Yuen finally relents, giving her the address, Blue Heart Apartments, room 303. Yun can't stop thanking her, repeating her apologies over and over as she memorizes the location, Blue Heart Apartments, room 303. Yuen watches her go, believing that matters like this eventually need to be settled, so it's best to let them resolve it themselves. Inside the apartment, Xiaawu has just sat down when the doorbell rings. He opens it, expecting to see Yuen returning. Instead, he finds Yun standing there, and his voice is ice cold as he asks what she could possibly want now. She asks why he didn't tell them he was looking for a place, claiming they would have understood, but he feels no need to explain himself. As his tone grows even more indifferent, Yun becomes increasingly flustered, struggling to maintain her composure in the face of his silence. She wonders aloud when they became like this and why he won't tell her anything anymore, finally asking why she even came here. Whether it was Yun or his own parents, he realizes none of them ever truly believed him, so why should he bother explaining anything now? Yun finally chokes out an apology, admitting she was wrong to doubt him and that she had simply let her anger get the better of her. He tells her there's no need to apologize because he never expected anyone to believe him anyway, a statement that feels like a physical pang in her chest. His words hit her like a whip, stinging her heart as she looks at him and asks if he can ever truly forgive her. Xiaawu lets out a long, weary sigh and tells her to go home, stating quite clearly that there is no longer any relationship between them. He explains there's nothing to forgive. They should simply remain classmates and nothing more, leaving her to stammer in disbelief. She wonders if they are truly destined to be just classmates as the sun sets, leaving her to wander the streets aimlessly once again. Xiaoyu's words feel like a blade twisting in her heart as she begins to look back on everything that led them to this point. Yun felt such deep regret that she wanted to slap herself, realizing she should have been the one person who truly understood Xiaawu. She was supposed to know him better than anyone, but as she stood there, her phone began to ring. It was her senior from the club. The voice on the other end asked if it was her, mentioning they had heard about Xiaawu and wondering if there had been some mistake. It seems the news about Xiaawu had already reached the school, and they had apparently issued a formal disciplinary notice against him. Yun was stunned by how fast things were moving, while her senior kept asking if she had misunderstood the situation. Choking back a sob, Yun couldn't bring herself to speak, as her senior urged her to go and communicate with Xiaawu properly. The senior reminded her that while others might not understand Xiaawu, she certainly should, which only made her feel more ashamed. Those words were like a dagger to her heart. After all, if she didn't understand him, who possibly could? The senior then decided to reveal something she probably shouldn't have, taking this chance to tell Yun the truth about the past. Remember that club task she thought the others had helped her with? Well, it turns out that wasn't the case at all. Everyone else had been far too busy with their own work, and it was actually Xiaawu who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes for her. He had truly cared for her, choosing to show his devotion through his actions rather than just empty words, which we see now was his way. The senior urged her to clear up any misunderstandings quickly before hanging up, leaving Yun feeling more overwhelmed than ever. She collapsed on the sidewalk and began to cry uncontrollably, realizing that despite how good he was to her, she never chose to believe him. Meanwhile, Ling hung up her own phone and ran frantically toward her mother, Linyu, with a look of pure panic. She cried out that something terrible was happening, as it seemed her brother was about to be expelled or disciplined by the school. It appeared Xiaawu was being punished over a massive misunderstanding, with the school wrongly believing he was involved in an illicit relationship. Linyu was certain that her husband, Chen Shou, must have said something to cause this, and she intended to find out the truth immediately. Not long after, Xiaawu stumbled back home, his face flushed red and his breath reeking of alcohol as he asked what the emergency was. He wondered why they were so desperate for him to return, completely unaware that Xiaoyu's entire future was currently hanging in the balance. Xiaawu admitted, with a smug sense of authority, that he was the one who pressured the school to follow through with a public punishment. He wanted to teach the boy a lesson, but Linyu demanded to know why he would do something so cruel to his own son. He claimed he always wanted Xiaawu to be a real man, but instead, he believed the boy was failing to learn anything good at all. According to him, Xiaawu was now mimicking others by chasing after a romance, which, in his eyes, was the ultimate distraction. He was furious that the boy wouldn't even come home, choosing to live elsewhere for a girl, something he vowed never to allow. He threatened to use even harsher methods if Xiaawu didn't change his ways, convinced that the boy could never truly escape his control. Chunling cut in, her voice trembling as she reminded him of the slap marks on Xiaoyu's face, insisting he wasn't in a relationship. She explained it was all a mistake by his classmates. The girl was simply helping him find a place to stay, and the truth was finally out. Xiaawu refused to believe it, claiming Xiaawu had confessed and told his daughter not to talk nonsense just to protect her brother. He accused her of harming Xiaawu with lies, but Linyu had finally reached her breaking point with her husband's drunken arrogance. She told him that while she used to support him unconditionally, she now realized she was wrong because he had become utterly obsessed. She noted that he only ever believed his own version of the truth, never once stopping to consider that he might actually be mistaken. Xiaawu tried to dismiss her words as irrelevant, but Linyu wasn't finished, mentioning the call they had just received from school. The situation had been clarified, and she told him he could verify it himself with the homeroom teacher if he still had doubts. Hearing this, Xiaoyu's expression finally shifted as he stammered, wondering why Xiaawu would admit to something he didn't do. Linyu shot back, asking what he expected. With a father like him, the boy knew that defending himself was completely useless. She then dropped the devastating truth. Their son only has a few months to live, so he simply doesn't care about these things anymore. The words hit Xiaawu like a physical blow, and he began to mutter to himself in total denial, repeating that it couldn't be true. Chunling pleaded with him to snap out of it and call the teacher immediately to see if there was any way to save Xiaoyu's future. Fumbling with his phone in a blind panic, Xiaawu finally began to dial the number, his hands shaking as reality started to sink in. Xiaawu finally gets through, stammering into the phone. "Hello, teacher? This is Xiaoyu's father. I wanted to verify today's events." His face pales as he listens, unable to comprehend how things went so wrong, especially since the boy had admitted to it himself. He asks how it could have turned out this way, growing desperate when the teacher admits even they don't fully understand the situation. Panicking, he asks if the punishment can still be revoked, reminding the teacher that his son is still just a student with a future. He argues that these are the best years of the boy's life, and a mistake that didn't even happen shouldn't be allowed to ruin everything. He admits, with a heavy heart, that he was the one who demanded the harsh treatment, but now the reality of the situation has changed. The teacher's response is cold. The punishment has already been published and cannot be revoked. A bit late for regrets, one might say. Xiaawu is incredulous, asking if a child's entire life should really be ruined over a misunderstanding like this. He begs the teacher to find a way, any way, to help, realizing now that this could haunt Xiaawu forever. After hanging up, Xiaoyu's lips are white and trembling, the weight of his own actions finally crushing him. He mutters to himself in a daze, repeating that he only did it for the boy's own good, a classic excuse for a controlling heart. The next morning, the sun shines brightly as Xiaawu wakes up, instinctively checking the time and reaching for his clothes. He remembers it's Saturday, then pauses, realizing he's moved out and no longer needs to follow his father's rigid, suffocating rules. With a newfound sense of freedom, he tosses the clothes aside and plays a rebellious song about not going to work or school. He crawls back into bed for a comfortable nap, not waking up again until noon, feeling more relaxed than he has in years. After a lazy wash, we see him head out for a quiet meal before stopping by the supermarket for some basic supplies. He picks up a few new outfits along with his household essentials, and by the time he finishes, it's already 2 in the afternoon. Since he didn't have time to clean properly yesterday, he decides to spend the day tidying up his new sanctuary so he can finally settle in. He spends the next few hours working diligently, organizing his small space exactly the way he wants it for the first time in his life. By 5 o'clock, he's exhausted but feels a strange, quiet sense of accomplishment. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. The phone rings, and we see Xiaawu glance at the caller ID before answering. It's his mother, Linyu. She starts by saying she had no idea what his father was doing, offering an apology on his behalf. Xiaawu gives a brief, polite response, but she insists his father was just mistaken and meant no harm. She claims he's always cared for him, but hearing Xiaoyu's dismissive tone, Linyu feels a pang of guilt. She suddenly remembers how Xiaawu used to look at them, always so eager to please, so desperate for approval. She asks if he's angry, a question that causes Xiaawu to drift into a brief, silent daze. Angry? He realizes they've never truly cared about his feelings before, so why ask about his anger now? He tells her no, but she persists, saying he can tell her anything, and she will truly listen this time. She laments that he doesn't seem to want to share things with her anymore, but he insists there's nothing to say. He repeats that there is nothing wrong, gently telling his mother not to overthink the situation. Deep down, he knows there are things a son simply cannot say to a parent, no matter how they ask. Besides, at this point, he feels there's no real need to talk. They never asked when it actually mattered. The line falls silent for a moment, and just as he thinks the call is over, her voice returns. She mentions his grandmother, suggesting they go visit her together over the next couple of days. Before he can answer, she adds that it will just be her and his sister, who also wants to go. He agrees, remembering how his grandmother had called him recently, saying she missed him dearly. He had suggested this visit before, but back then, his parents hadn't even given it a second thought. After everything that happened, he had nearly forgotten about it. Later, we find him waiting outside a shop. With his backpack on, he looks quite composed, so much so that passers-by can't help but steal a glance. A moment later, a red car pulls up, and Linyu steps out of the driver's seat to greet him. As the car pulls up, Linyu steps out from the driver's seat and immediately asks Xiaawu what he'd like to eat. She offers to go buy him something, but Xiaawu, feeling a bit uncomfortable with this sudden warmth, simply tells her it's not necessary. He opens the rear door and slides inside, where we see his sister, Chun-Lin, sitting with her small backpack and a worried expression. Unlike Xiaawu, who shares a deep bond with their grandmother, the elderly woman is known for being rather cold toward everyone else. Since she treats even Chun-Lin with that same distance, the little sister is, quite understandably, a bit afraid of the upcoming visit. Chun-Lin greets him with a timid brother, and Xiaawu simply nods, sitting quietly by her side as the journey begins. The car starts moving, weaving through the city's asphalt streets before long and heading out toward the open countryside. Their grandmother lives in a rural village quite far from the city, a trip that usually takes about 2 hours by car. Along the way, Linyu enthusiastically asks about his life, though Xiaawu only offers brief, scattered answers in return. As the trees outside the window blur past, the rhythm of the road causes Xiaoyu's memories to come rushing back like a tide. He remembers being about 10 years old during a summer break when his parents were far too busy with work to look after him. As those memories surface, he recalls that particular summer when his father and mother had no time to spare for him. They had left him with his grandfather to be cared for, while his sister was taken to his father's office so they could watch her there. Since the break lasted 30 days, his father worried about exhausting the grandfather and decided to move Xiaawu halfway through. And so, his mother took him to stay with his maternal grandparents, a time when his grandfather was still alive and well. That was the summer his relationship with them truly blossomed, forming a bond that would only grow stronger in the years to follow. From then on, he spent most of his breaks with his grandparents, eventually gaining enough independence to travel there on his own. However, when he was 12, his grandfather passed away, leaving his grandmother all alone in that quiet village. He began spending even more time with her then, though thinking of his grandfather still fills him with a lingering sense of guilt. He wonders, what if? But Chun-Lin's voice suddenly pulls him back to the present as Linyu continues driving. Both Linyu and Chun-Lin look over at him, and Xiaawu suddenly realizes that, without even noticing it, they have finally arrived. Xiaawu opens the car door and steps out. Meanwhile, Linyu parks the car and prepares to greet her mother. Stepping out of the vehicle, Linyu walks into the courtyard and calls out in a clear, loud voice to announce their arrival. A gray-haired elderly woman walks out of the house. She shares a striking resemblance to Linyu, though her face is etched with deep wrinkles. Looking to be in her 60s and carrying a bit of weight, this woman is none other than the grandmother, Zhang Huaxian. Upon seeing Linyu, Huaxian merely gives a cold, indifferent nod without saying a word. But then, her eyes find Xiaawu. A rare smile finally touches the grandmother's face as she steps forward, speaking to Xiaawu with genuine affection, calling him child. She frets that he looks thinner since they last met, then pulls him toward the house while fussing over him warmly. She seems to completely ignore Linyu and Chun-Lin standing behind them. Seeing this, little Chun-Lin speaks up timidly. She whispers to her mother that grandma doesn't seem to like her, but Linyu reassures her that it's just her grandmother's personality. She explains that Huaxian has become distant in recent years and it's nothing personal, though she admits grandma treats Xiaawu differently. She suggests it's simply because Xiaawu spent so much more time with her growing up. Inside, we see Huaxian lead Xiaawu to a seat. The house remains exactly as he remembers it, right down to the old traditional bed. Huaxian holds his hand as they sit. Everything in the room seems frozen in time, yet Xiaawu can't help but notice a subtle, unsettling change in his grandmother. She is more talkative than before, yet looks far more haggard, giving him a lingering sense of unease. To be honest, it's a bit worrying. Linyu mentions they will be staying for a couple of days and offers to tidy up the rooms so they can settle in. After chatting for a while, Xiaawu stands up and tells his grandmother that he wants to go visit his grandfather's grave. The elderly woman stands with practiced ease, heading to the storage room to find some paper gold ingots and traditional spirit money. She hands him a few sticks of incense and tells him to go quickly, remarking that his grandfather must surely miss him. Linyu's expression flickers with a mix of emotions before she lets out a long sigh, muttering that what's done is done. We follow Xiaawu as he heads toward a small hillside in the village, which serves as his grandfather's final resting place. His grandfather chose this spot himself, wanting to stay close to his wife even after death. Xiaawu remains there for over an hour. When the time finally comes to leave, he reluctantly begins his descent. To be honest, his bond with his grandparents was always unique. Unlike his relationship with his parents, Xiaawu felt a deep sense of belonging whenever he was with his grandfather or grandmother. It was only around these elders that he truly felt supported. We see him return, his eyes red from crying once again. Xiaawu shakes his head, trying to compose himself, while Huaxian gently pats him on the head as a gesture of comfort. She tells him it's the same every time, reminding him that what happened to his grandfather wasn't his fault. Xiaawu can only manage a forced smile. Nearby, Linyu lowers her head, perhaps reflecting on the lingering tension in the family. If it weren't for her son's condition, the old grievances might never have faded. Little Qianlin asks what's happening, but is told not to pry. Qianlin retreats quietly. By evening, Grandma has prepared a massive feast, and naturally, every single dish is one of Xiaoyu's favorites. Seeing the spread makes Xiaoyu's heart ache with a familiar sadness. At times like these, he feels particularly sensitive. He recalls how, in the past, he used to act the same way here as he did at home, quiet and hesitant to ask for anything. He never dared to say what he liked, but his grandfather had encouraged him to speak his mind and share his preferences. After coaxing the truth out of him, his grandparents made sure to remember every detail of what he enjoyed eating. From then on, they only bought and cooked the things he loved. His grandfather used to say that was the only way money was well spent. Linyu looks at the table and remarks on how much effort her mother must have put into the meal. Huaxian shows a flash of dissatisfaction, telling her to just eat and stop talking so much. Yes, she's still as blunt as ever. Linyu understands her mother's temperament well enough not to take it personally, and she begins to eat with a heavy heart. Beside them, little Qianlin eats happily. Even though Grandma isn't fond of her, she still thinks Grandma's cooking is the best in the world. The house isn't large, consisting of a storage room and 2 bedrooms where many of their memories were made. In the past, Xiaawu used to share a room with his grandparents, but with 4 of them here now, Grandma decides she will sleep with Xiaawu. Linyu and little Qianlin take the other room. Despite the crowded space, Xiaawu feels a rare and comforting sense of belonging here. His heart feels steady for once. As they settle in, Huaxian lies on the bed and quietly asks if something has happened recently. She notes that he seems quite listless, but Xiaawu tries to deflect, asking why she would think such a thing. Grandma admits she doesn't quite know, but she can feel that something is wrong, and deep down, she's afraid for him. Xiaawu tells her not to overthink things with a gentle smile. To be honest, coming to Grandma's house this time brought him both joy and dread. He was terrified she would ask these very questions. He knows all too well how much pain the truth would cause her if she found out. Grandma sighs, saying as long as he's okay, that's all that matters, though she admits her mind has grown more sensitive with age. She was simply worried, but Xiaawu reassures her that he is fine and that they all need to take care of themselves. Grandma agrees to stay well for his sake, yet Xiaawu is suddenly overcome by an inexplicable wave of sorrow. The current situation reminds him painfully of his grandfather. He remembers how, in his final days, his grandfather spoke to him in this exact same way. It felt as though he were settling his affairs, and that memory fills Xiaawu with an unprecedented sense of panic and unease. In the other room, we see Qianlin tossing and turning on the wooden bed, unable to find sleep as she whispers to her mother. She asks what's wrong, noting that Grandma looks much more haggard and worn out than she did before. She repeats her concern, worried by how frail Grandma appears. Her mother tells her not to let her imagination run wild. Linyu claims that everyone looks this way when they get older, though her body gives a barely perceptible shiver as she speaks in a muffled voice. Seeing her mother's reaction, Qianlin drops the subject, but looking at her mother's profile, she mentions something she noticed about dinner. She points out that the dishes Grandma made weren't grandfather's favorites at all. They were all the things Xiaawu loves to eat. Hearing this, Linyu opens her mouth to speak, but a sudden, overwhelming wave of guilt washes over her heart instead. And so, the realization sinks in. Xiaawu remains awake that night, his mind drifting back to the very beginning of his journey. As the night deepens, Linyu finds herself thinking of her father's passing and how her mother has been so melancholy and withdrawn all these years. She realizes now that some things are only truly cherished once they are lost, and the weight of that realization is heavy indeed. Filled with an unprecedented sense of unease and fear, she feels even less brave about telling her mother the truth of what has happened. The next morning, Grandma rises early as usual. The older generation in the countryside always wakes with the sun, feeling restless if they aren't working. By the time Grandma is up, Xiaawu is already awake and moving. He notices the water vat in the kitchen is more than half empty. And so, Xiaawu picks up the shoulder pole and heads toward the spring on the hillside to fetch fresh water for the household. Everyone in this village and the neighboring ones prefers the mountain spring water, believing it to be much cleaner and more hygienic. When Linyu and Qianlin finally get up, Xiaawu is already gone. Qianlin decides she might as well go and take a look herself. To be honest, Qianlin isn't quite used to being alone with Grandma, so she slips away while her mother and grandmother are talking. Once outside, she finally breathes a sigh of relief. Even though she's rarely visited this village, being outdoors feels far more comfortable. She can't help but wonder what Grandma meant earlier. Deep down, she suspects something significant happened between her brother and their grandfather. She thinks back to when she was 11 years old, the very year her grandfather passed away. It was a turning point for everyone. Thinking about it now, Chun-Lin suddenly realizes something. While her mother had always been strict with Xiaawu, her attitude changed sharply back then. It was as if a shift occurred in the way her mother looked at him, and the memory of that change begins to haunt her. Chun-Lin's curiosity grows deeper with every step. As she walks, she hears the low murmur of voices drifting from nearby. Under a large tree not far from the village, we see a few elderly residents sitting together, gossiping about the local families. They are talking about Grandma Zhang's grandson, noting how remarkably filial the boy is compared to her own children, who rarely visit. One of them remembers his name is Xiaawu. He's the one who is always coming back to check on the old woman. They recall the story of how he wanted to go out and buy things, and old man Lin followed him out, only to never return. The elders whisper about how his father beat him black and blue back then, and would have continued if Grandma Zhang hadn't stepped in. They whisper that he might have been beaten to death if not for her. It was all fate. Really, a child being a bit playful is hardly a crime. It's no wonder the boy was blamed, though it was simply old man Lin's bad luck. Hearing this, Chun-Lin is so startled, she nearly hides. As she connects the dots, many things finally begin to make sense. And yet, if this is the truth, she can't help but wonder about one thing. Why is Grandma still so incredibly kind to her brother? It seems almost contradictory, given the circumstances. It truly is strange. While she mutters to herself, she spots a figure slowly descending from the hillside, carrying 2 buckets of water on a pole. Chun-Lin strides forward to meet him. After breakfast, Grandma rises slowly and returns to her room, leaving the others to their thoughts. Xiaawu begins clearing the table and heads into the kitchen. Left alone with her mother, Chun-Lin asks, "Mom, do you actually hate my brother?" She asks the question cautiously, having waited for a long time. Lin Yu is caught completely off guard by the sudden inquiry. Her mouth opens, but no words come out at first. She takes a slow breath and asks why she would think that, so Chun-Lin explains what she heard outside. Lin Yu stares blankly for a moment, lost in thought. Then, glancing toward the kitchen where Xiaawu is working, she makes a decision. She pulls Chun-Lin outside, away from the house. "That all happened many years ago," she begins, her voice heavy with the past. Her mother begins to reflect with a deep sigh. Chun-Lin asks if Grandpa really died because of her brother, touching a raw nerve. That event was the one thing her mother could never let go of, the greatest source of pain in her heart. She looks up at her daughter. In this quiet moment, she realizes something she hadn't noticed before. Her daughter has grown up without her even realizing it. She sees a young woman standing before her now, tall and graceful. "It was during the summer break," she starts, "back when you were small. Xiaawu had been making a fuss, wanting to go to your father's company with you. But your father could only look after one child at a time. And so, your brother was sent to stay with your grandfather. For a while, it seemed fine. He wasn't causing any trouble at all. We thought everything would proceed smoothly. But then, without any warning, the terrible news reached us. Your grandfather had passed away. When we rushed back, we discovered that your brother had insisted on going out to play. Your grandfather couldn't say no to him and took him out. No one knew that a single slip on the mountain would change everything. He fell from the slope. Your grandfather's health was clearly failing those days, yet your brother insisted on pestering him to go out. That specific event has always weighed heavily on me. If it hadn't been for him, your grandfather might still be here today. The elders say a child's playfulness is just nature, and it was simply your grandfather's bad luck." Lin Yu remains silent for a long time. She gently pats Chun-Lin's head. "Yes," she sighs, "it seems we have been far too stubborn all these years. We were so consumed by our own persistence that we failed to see the true nature of what happened." Deep down, she feels a profound regret. If not for that stubbornness, her relationship with her son wouldn't have become so strained. As she speaks, she turns her gaze toward Chun-Lin. "But you must remember one thing," she warns her daughter. "You must never mention these matters in front of your grandmother, do you understand? She is already so fragile lately. If she hears you talking about your grandfather, it will surely break her heart. And her health, as we know, is quite poor." By the time afternoon rolls around, Lin Yu suggests going to the nearby bamboo forest with Xiaawu, but she is flatly rejected. The house falls into a strange, heavy silence. Ironically, that bamboo forest was once a place Xiaawu had begged her mother to visit. She had planted those bamboo trees herself, but that was a long time ago. Bringing it up now feels entirely meaningless. When Zhang Huaxian returns and learns what happened, he gives Lin Yu a stern scolding without a moment's hesitation. He reminds her that when the child actually wanted her company, she was nowhere to be found. Now, she suddenly wants to play the part. Zhang Huaxian then turns to Xiaawu and suggests, "Child, why don't you head over to Grandpa Chi's house for a visit? If you come to the village and don't stop by to see him, he will certainly be quite upset with you." Grandpa Chi, or Chi Fengbua, was a soldier just like her grandfather. The two of them were old comrades with a very deep bond. After retiring, they were inseparable, sometimes spending their days fishing, other times staying home to play long games of chess. As a child, Xiaawu often followed her grandfather to visit Grandpa Chi, and so the two of them became quite close over time. Even though her grandfather passed away years ago, Grandpa Chi still thinks of him constantly whenever Xiaawu visits the village. He knew he had to make time to visit Grandpa Chi. All right, I'll go too, Lin said, glancing at the tense atmosphere. He shivered slightly and quickened his pace to keep up with Xiaawu. Before long, they arrived at a red brick house. The wooden gate featured 2 door knockers, one of which was fastened with a large, old-fashioned bronze lock. Standing here, we get a distinct sense of being transported back to the 90s. Brother, is Grandpa Chi really here? She asked. The village is divided into the new and old sections. Her grandmother lives in the new village, but this place is different. While the new village is bustling with beautiful houses, the old village feels forgotten, as if time simply stopped moving. Only a few scattered houses remain, surrounded by overgrown trees that create a rather eerie, somber atmosphere. Being just a young girl, Lin couldn't help but let her mind wander toward ghost stories and things that go bump in the night. Xiaawu told her there was no need to fear. Grandpa Chi was a soldier who had fought bandits, the kind of man who scares away any ghost. Lin blinked, feeling a bit more at ease. Xiaawu then pulled the door knocker and called out a few times. Soon, the heavy door creaked open. A white-haired man in his 60s stepped out to greet them. Though he looked weathered by time, his frame was clearly still robust and strong. As Confronting saw Xiaawu, his cloudy eyes brightened. It was a look of pure, unexpected recognition. When did you get back? He asked warmly. Xiaawu pulled Lin forward to introduce her to the old soldier. The two of them followed Confronting inside. So, the siblings have returned together, he noted. That doesn't happen very often, does it? To be honest, seeing them both, there was a rare sight for the old man. As he spoke, he eagerly set out some freshly washed fruit. Your grandfather always used to say how wonderful it would be, he reminisced. He wished you two would visit him together. It's a pity he didn't live long enough to see this day. Inside the house, a dim, yellow light bathed the walls, and a few pieces of fruit sat nearby on a small table. Seeing this simple, cozy scene, Lin felt an inexplicable sense of peace. Sometimes, even the smallest things can offer the greatest comfort. That sense of peace was far more effective than any lingering unease, and soon, the three of them sat down to talk for a while. Suddenly, there was another knock at the door. Wait a moment, I'll be right back, Confronting said, turning his head toward the sound. He pulled the door open. Why are you here? He asked. Uncle Chi, I was just on my way to see my mother and happened to pass by. The visitor had brought a few things to drop off. Hearing that voice, Lin jumped up from her stool and hurried toward the corner. Uncle Lin, it really is you, she cried. Lingu looked at her with a face full of smiles. Lin, what are you doing here? This middle-aged man, Lingu, was actually the third uncle of both Xiaawu and Lin. Their grandfather had 3 children in total. Their mother was the second child, making Lingu her younger brother. Thanks to their grandfather's strict upbringing, the family remained close even after moving into separate households. Of course, this closeness didn't exactly extend to Xiaawu. Hearing his uncle's voice, Xiaawu didn't even stand up, he simply remained seated. In the past, things were quite different. He used to be very warm and polite when greeting them, but he eventually learned that his kindness was only met with cold words. Xiaawu wasn't about to waste his breath on people who didn't care for him. Meanwhile, the others walked inside, chatting away. Lingu was a man with thick eyebrows and large eyes, bearing a striking, somewhat rugged resemblance to their grandfather. Then he spotted Xiaawu. He knit his brows, his face instinctively twisting into a look of pure disgust. What are you doing here? He demanded. Hearing those words, Confront's expression darkened instantly. You brat, he snapped. Take your things and get the hell out of my house. Uncle Chi, I didn't mean it like that. Lingu stammered, but Confront simply glared at him with wide, furious eyes. Get out, the old man roared. Lingu tried to explain himself again, but the old soldier wasn't listening to a single word. The old man's roar was filled with a terrifying, murderous aura that seemed to freeze the very air in the room. It was quite a performance. Seeing that Confront was truly enraged, Lingu scrambled to grab his things and fled in a panic. Uncle Chi, I'll come back another day. Don't mind him, the old man said, calming down. Let's get back to our conversation. Lin, however, felt a bit uneasy after that display. She couldn't help but feel a new sense of dread toward Grandpa Chi. To be honest, that sudden burst of intensity had frightened her quite a bit. As the group sat back down to talk for a while longer, Confront didn't show even a hint of his earlier ferocity. Lin's heart, meanwhile, gradually began to settle. As the sky started to darken, Xiaawu walked over to the water vat to take a look. He told Grandpa Chi that he'd be heading home soon, but offered to fill the vat first. The old man happily agreed. And so, Xiaawu headed out with a carrying pole. Soon, only Confront and Lin were left in the courtyard. Lin felt a bit uneasy again, but she didn't dare wander off or speak out of turn, so she simply listened to the old man. Confront remained quite talkative, reminiscing about his time with her grandfather and even bringing up the earlier incident. As he spoke of the past and her third uncle, Lingu, Lin learned a secret she hadn't known before. It turned out that back when her uncle was kidnapped by human traffickers, it was Confront who had fought them off. At the time, there were 6 of them, including 2 trained martial artists serving as bodyguards. Despite being seriously injured, Confront managed to cripple all 6 men and rescue the boy. It was quite a feat, really. Because of this, her uncle always kept that debt of gratitude in his heart, never forgetting to share his best belongings with the old man. Hearing this, Chun-Lin suddenly remembered something and mentioned that she heard her grandfather died because of Xiaoyu's playfulness. She explained that this was why her uncle hated her brother so much. To be honest, it was a heavy burden for a child to carry. She admitted she used to just feel sorry for her brother, but now she thought perhaps the adults had their own hidden reasons. Who told you that? The old man interrupted. Your grandfather was not killed because of your brother. Chi Fangbua's expression turned dead serious as he spoke with absolute, unwavering certainty. Chun-Lin was stunned. She insisted her mother had told her that her grandfather died because of Xiaawu, and her uncle's attitude today seemed to prove it. Everything she knew pointed to her brother's guilt, yet here was the man who knew her grandfather best, saying otherwise. Chun-Lin's mind simply couldn't process this contradiction. We see her struggle to make sense of a lifelong lie. Seeing her confusion, Chi Fangbua let out a cold, angry huff, demanding to know who had been spreading such nonsense. Chun-Lin was terrified. Chun-Lin shook her head, and seeing her look so terrified, Chi Fangbua softened his expression and began to comfort her. He told her firmly that her grandfather wasn't killed by her brother. He had been seriously injured during a mission years ago. There were lingering complications that hadn't been properly treated, and for years, his health had been steadily declining. He needed to go to a large hospital for treatment, but her grandmother was illiterate and didn't know how to handle the paperwork. Usually, it was Chi Fangbua who accompanied him to the doctor. Chun-Lin listened quietly, sensing the old man's deep sorrow. As Grandpa Chi spoke of her grandfather, we hear a hint of guilt in his voice. That last time, her grandfather felt particularly unwell. Unfortunately, Chi Fangbua was away on business in another region and simply couldn't make it back in time to help. He had sensed something was wrong even then. Because he was stuck far away and unable to return, he felt a growing unease. He had urged the grandmother to find Chun-Lin's mother and the other children so they could take the old man to the hospital. But in the end, what happened? Every single one of them claimed to be too busy and no one could find the time. It was under those lonely circumstances that her grandfather passed away. Otherwise, with his skills, a simple fall on a hillside wouldn't have killed him. Chun-Lin was left dazed by the impact of this revelation. It was a lot to process, to say the least. She wondered why her grandfather hadn't explained the situation. Chi Fangbua noted that the man was simply too proud for that. He likely reached out to his children, but because they were all so busy, her parents and the others refused to help. Her grandfather was the type of man who would only ask for help once, and never a second time.